I want to start by talking a little bit about us as an organization. Global UXD. You guys might know it as SFUXD or SVUXD or NYC. We do have these local chapters and international chapters, but as a whole, we do consider us as global UXD. What we're like I said, this interdisciplinary community with chapters. And what we really try to do is enhance the value and deepen the impact of design thinking, of creativity, of global innovation. And the way we do that is through talks, panels, workshops, which this one is a little bit of a combination of a couple of those, and other things that once we start being more in person again, we'll be able to go back to doing co-working sessions and happy hours and all that fun stuff. And our goals as an organization is design thinking for all. So it's not just for designers, it's for non-designers as well, to share and advocate design thinking as a philosophy for everyone. Also being able to create an impact, creating a meaning and a positive impact on society. And then for personal and professional development, providing those tools and develop those personal skills and qualities for everyone, as well as a community finding common purpose and drive within the community and connecting with each other. Speaking of, we're always looking for volunteers, specifically people helping organizing and hosting these events so that we could have more of them. Because for Alex, who's our other organizer, and myself, this is a side thing for us and we love doing it, but we would love to be able to do more of these in the future. So you could contact me, Mila at globaluxd.com, or Slack me. And then, on to tonight's event. So we'll be using this next hour to review common cognitive biases that can get in the way of conducting effective design research and looking at how those show up in our work from discovery to implementation. And our guests tonight, Dr. Asha Bauer and Christine Angel, are here with us today, and they'll be talking a little bit more about that and guiding us through this process. So Asha Bauer is a director of clinical care at BetterUp. She has a background in psychology and UX research as well, so that's why we have her here today. And Christine Angel, who does a plethora of things, is also the founder and innovation and design research strategist of Hopscotch Labs. And then as far as our agenda today, it's basically this, I'll briefly go over that. We'll talk about biases, what they are, why you should care, the top 5 biases, how they show up at work, and then we'll do an activity of this bias brainstorm, as well as reframing the problem. So I think at this point, I'll kick it off to Asha Bauer to talk a little bit about biases, what they are, and why you should care.
Amazing. Thank you, Mila. And so happy to be with everyone here today. So as Mila mentioned, I have this diverse background where I am a psychologist by training, and I bring general nerdiness around human beings from that, which I hope to impart to all of you today. And I also have worked in UX research in various capacities. And so I'll be bringing in an angle of how this relates to UX research in particular. And then we'll open it up to Christine, who will take us and expand us into how this relates to the entire design cycle and really take us through some exercises to think about this more thoroughly. But we need to start where we are, which is defining our terms. So what are biases? So Mila, let's go to the next slide. So essentially, bias is just a part of being human. And so I know the connotations around bias can sometimes be negative, and you may be here today thinking, well, I need to fix my bias or get rid of my biases because they maybe make me a less better human, or they get in the way of me being effective. But I'm here to tell you that bias is actually just part of being human. It's a part of being alive. Generally speaking, the way bias works is it happens because our brains are not capable of processing everything that's going on in our environment at once. It would be too overwhelming for the mind. And so from the time we're young, we start to develop shortcuts. These mental shortcuts are heuristics that help us make sense of the world around us. We actually really need bias in order to just get through the day. And we all do this. So this is going to be my invitation for the rest of this hour, is that you see this as part of being human, no judgment, and we're just going to honor that bias is here. We all have them. We have a lot of them, and it's okay. It's completely unavoidable. And so the goal today won't be to fix them, but to be aware of them. Unfortunately, the downside to bias is that these shortcuts make us inaccurate in our judgment at times. They can mislead us, and they can cause us to make decisions based on false or incomplete information, which is why it's so important for us to bring this into our mindset as we start to work on design thinking problems. So next slide. And I'll briefly touch on how this relates specific to UX research, as that's really my lane that I've specialized in as someone who's not a designer, but who has done extensive research, both academically and in UX. So bias can influence the conclusions that we come to as we make sense of our data. And if you've done UX research at all, I want you to just keep in mind, this is both qualitative and quantitative data, because when your data comes in, you need to make sense of it and come to conclusions. And so this is a place where bias can really come in. It also comes in the process of conducting research, such as in your user interviews, in contextual inquiry studies, usability testing, because we can, if we aren't mindful and aware, unintentionally guide our users to give us the responses we're actually expecting to find. So again, the goal isn't to get rid of bias, but it is to be mindful of it. And one thing that helps us be mindful of things is to give them names. Psychologists love doing this, and we've come up with lots of different terms over time to kind of refer to different types of bias. So let's go through 5 really common ones that you can now be aware of in your day-to-day life and see where they're coming up, if in your design work, if you are a designer or working in the design field in any way, and just generally as you're going about your day. So let's go through the top 5. So the first bias I'll go through with you is the anchoring bias. So essentially, an anchoring bias is when you are in a new situation, the first piece of information you pick up influences other things that you see. It anchors you. An example of this is that if you go to the store and you see a crock pot that is $75, you go to another store and you see it for $65, you're going to think that's a steal, even if all other stores in the surrounding neighborhood sell it for $50. So we tend to anchor to the first piece of information, and it biases the rest of the things that come up for us. So the question to ask yourself in your work as well as in your life is, do you continue to remain open to additional insights beyond the first couple that have come in? Another bias, I would say this is one of the most common biases, is the halo effect. Also one that we don't like to look at. We can have a bit of embarrassment around the fact that this is real. So let's just all own it. What is beautiful is good. That's the phrase that comes to mind with the halo effect. And essentially what this means is that when we see something as aesthetically pleasing, we then generalize that to other qualities about it. So I'll give you a very specific example with user interviewing. And this one is one that we might be like, oh no, kind of to address, but it's important. If you found someone that you're working with to be physically attractive, you may unintentionally and unconsciously see them as smarter, see their opinions as more valid, see the responses that they're giving as more important, and you might not even realize that you're doing it. So again, biases happen mostly unconsciously. We're not aware of them, but it's something that once you're aware of it, you can start to address. And of course, this plays a role in other things as well. We tend to look for beautiful design solutions instead of maybe effective design solutions. And Christine will get into that quite a bit more as we move forward. Another bias is the confirmation bias. So confirmation bias is the fact that we tend to listen more deeply to information that confirms our already held beliefs. So if we already believe something, we're looking for things that will actually confirm that. And that means we may literally not even hear or see anything that's to the contrary. Our brain will filter it out if we're not paying attention. And this can come up across all sorts of user research, and it can come up when you are kind of designing a solution in general, that you want to be aware of the fact that you may only hear what you want to hear unless you pay closer attention. Next bias on the list here is the self-serving bias. And this one is an important one that can come up a lot at work. So this essentially is that we tend to attribute good things that happen to internal causes, that I caused the good things, and bad things that happen to external causes. This happened because of some external thing, right? This can come up in terms of like, if your project's not working out, it's like there's external reasons. If it is working out, it's due to like my success as, as a designer, for instance. And you would like to think about how this can play in the workplace, right? Thinking through, are we wanting to bolster our reputation in the workplaces? Are we really wanting this result maybe for a direct report for our team? And just being aware of the fact that drive, which is not a bad thing to have ambition and want to do well, might also drive us to bring this bias in and filter things accordingly. So are you reinforcing institutional biases? Something to be aware of. And this fifth one here is the status quo bias, which essentially stands to say that we have an aversion to change. In general, we like to keep things as they are. And what that can mean is that as we're going through design research, for instance, if what we're seeing coming out of the research is actually saying that we need to make a big overhaul or make a big change in some way, we might downplay the results of what we're seeing because we might not want to make all these big changes. It's a lot of work. And so we can kind of see our ability to maybe play up the data that confirms things that keep things the same and downplay the data that kind of helps us make the changes we might need to make. So are we communicating the right level of importance in the data that we're seeing? And since we're all having fun and we're seeing lots of biases here, we threw in a bonus one. Let's go to the next slide. So let's go through one more because this bias is an important one and one that I think especially if you do any design research, any design work at all, is a really important one to keep in mind. It's called the congruence bias. The congruence bias is essentially that we tend to only want to prove our hypotheses true. We don't actually really want to prove them false. We don't want to actively look for information that disproves our hypothesis. And so this can really get in the way of us thinking clearly and seeing innovative solutions that go against the grain of our hypotheses. So asking yourself, and again, this is in your work, but just in general in our life as we go about the world, making hypotheses about how things work and the most effective way to move forward, are we seeking to confirm what we already believe to be true? Or are we starting to uncover things that can maybe guide us into a new and novel direction and help us discover something really powerful? Keeping this bias in check is crucial in order to do that. So I'll pause here and just say that these biases that we've gone over so far really are just the top of the iceberg. There's a lot of biases out there, and the main thing is just to be aware of them. So let's continue as I pass it off to Christine now and keep this in mind as we start to see how bias plays a role in how we work.
Thanks, Asha. It's amazing just going through all those biases. You see so many of them in your work on a day-to-day level. I'm always floored at when I see that list of like, oh Christ, I saw that today. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah. So as I'm a recovering designer and now I do research full-time for my work. And what I've noticed is that when those biases do show up in work, it's because we're not inviting in enough information to open up ourselves and our projects to the potential of new ideas. The traditional path here is that you've got a group of people that get together, they lay out the the problem that the client wants to have solved, you brainstorm some solutions, and then you're off to the races and you're developing something. Now, if we go to the next slide, what's changed is that within the UX process, they've incorporated a little bit more research where we go out and we talk to our users, hopefully. And by doing that, it starts to eliminate some of our own biases. But you have to be careful, because if you're only going out with the questions that you have and you haven't incorporated anything from the rest of the team, you may be missing an opportunity there. And so you're starting to bring back your biases and you're closing yourself off to potential new challenges and new ways of solving this problem. As you do this new double diamond process where you explore what's possible in the world and then narrow in on, no, we're just going to focus on this one problem, and then go back and diverge into much broader opportunities. There's a chance within each part of these stages to reincorporate your biases. So a big point with this entire talk is, let's make sure that we recognize our biases for what they are, surface them, and make sure that we're surfacing the entire team's biases. And then as we work through the problem of solving our client's problem and developing an opportunity for them, let's ensure that we're not bringing back our biases or following the client's own biases and allowing those biases to change our direction and influence what choices that we make. Next slide. So question is, like, what do we do? Now what? We know what these biases are. And next slide. Our goal is really to uncover your biases and use them to dig deeper. So today we're going to try a bias brainstorm via mind map, and then we'll talk a little bit about what do you do with that mind map after. If we have time, we may actually frame that into a problem, but first we're going to do the bias brainstorm. A bias brainstorm is a method that we use to really uncover our thoughts and ideas around a subject. You use it right away at the beginning of a project. The brief comes in from the client, and that's when you get your the salespeople in, you get the tech people together, you get any of the other project managers together, and you start discussing what is this thing that we're going to try to solve here. A lot of it is like doing a stakeholder interview. You're trying to uncover what people's beliefs are so that you don't misrepresent the problem later on and you don't end up having issues. It's especially useful for when you're designing with new populations or your team is especially large. You definitely want to make sure that you're normalizing what is known and not having issues that are stopping your forward momentum come up later. So with a bias brainstorm, I recommend using a mind map. And the goal there is like we're going to fill a page with all sorts of different ideas. There should be no judgment applied to this. So negative and positive ideas. So if you have odd associations towards, say, today we're going to be working with loss. If you have weird associations with how people lose things, we should surface them. If you have a very positive associations to it, we'll surface that as well. Once you've done your big brainstorm and you've pulled out all of these different ideas and subject matters, that's when you start looking for, where are these gaps? What don't I know, or doesn't the team know about this problem? You also want to know, where do I have too much coverage? Because that usually indicates that you've got potential for blind spots to new ideas. Once you've done that, then you're off to the races. There's a lot that you can do there. In my own practice, I jump straight into problem framing from there and then use that to help suss out exactly what I'm going to research. But there's many other ways to do that. So first, next step, let's talk a little bit about what we want to do with mind mapping. So today, the reason why we were using mind mapping is because it's an easy way to show relationships between one idea and another idea. That's exactly what needs to happen with this, right? We've got a bias that we're going to uncover, and darn it, I want to know, where is it coming from? Why does it exist? Who put it there? And also, what are some of the other things associated to that? And so we're looking for things that are fuzzy concepts. We're looking for business concepts. Who are the competitors? What replacements exist out there? Who are the buyers to this thing? We're looking for concrete concepts. So if you're brainstorming around a feature that you want to add, make sure you're also adding concepts around that feature, such as use cases, functions that you're expecting to see. What other things would you expect to see in the real world environment where somebody is using that product and that feature? And of course, those I can't say the word, associations and relationships to other ideas. Our goal is quantity, because quality will come later. And quality will come with research, will come with digging into what is this problem and why does it exist. So today we're going to be focusing on the land of lost toys. Our client is Balboa Park and Balboa Zoo. So they're both have a joint lost and found. And what we've noticed with the zoo and the park is that when people lose things, it's not like they're just losing a straw or a cup. It's their favorite straw, it's their favorite cup, it's their favorite toy. And oh no, it's not just objects. They're losing family members and they're losing direction. Sometimes they're even losing their mind, because kids cannot survive the zoo and exit without losing it. So we're going to use the bias brainstorm method and the mind map to flesh out what kinds of things we think about when we think about loss and a zoo or park experience. Now I'm going to take over screen sharing here. And Mila, I'm going to give you a, okay, desktop 2, okay. Okay, so you should see my screen, and there's a bit.ly over here. Mila, this is in our screen and our slide. Can you share that with the audience, please?
I'm sorry, share the mind map?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, the bit.ly.
Yep, the bit.ly.
Oh, yes, one moment.
Okay, and I believe at this time, if you have any questions, definitely drop it into the Q&A. And Mila, if you could, I guess.
Yeah, I'm trying to get to it.
We can definitely open up the options at this point. So what we're going to do is, you can see I've already got a couple different things here. I'd like you to join us in this mind map. It's in Google Docs. So if you have Google Docs, definitely open it up through your own Google account. It will definitely help you. As we go, on the side, we have a variety of different tools. And within the sticky note tool, you can add different ideas. So for example, with lost toys, I've already got a favorite toy, pacifier, somebody found it. Okay, so if someone found it, they've turned it in. And I'm going to change the color to green so that we know it goes with that one. Right away, this mind map tool gives you this opportunity to, okay. And let's see.
You wanted me to share the bit.ly.
And it looks like I need to open up, comment it down. Restricted. Okay, so this looks like anyone with the link. Oops, that did not, I needed it. Editor. Okay, so it looks like now everyone should be able to do that. Nathaniel, can you
Thanks for
take a
the
look and see if that worked?
Yeah, I just answered a question with the bit.ly, so I think that should, yeah, I feel like people can get it now.
Okay, it looks like everyone's coming in. That's great. So as you start coming in and you've got ideas, add them here and then show how they're connected. I'm going to move Lost Child down. And feel free to add them to any of them. The goal is to get as specific as possible. So with pacifiers, my immediate thought here is gross. I don't know who's going to pick that up, but it definitely would not be me. Okay. So I encourage you all to add thoughts in here for any of these. And Mila, can we open up the conversation so we can see if
Yeah, absolutely. If anyone has any questions at this point, I think I didn't mention that before, but at any point during this talk and workshop, if you guys had any thoughts or questions, feel free to add them to the Q&A and we can get to them. We also saved a little bit of time afterwards as well.
Yeah. So when I've done this study, this activity in the past, we end up with a lot of objects and a lot of like interesting different challenges. So like with the blanket that's lost, where did it get lost? It got lost in the parking lot, and it probably got ran over. So that's kind of gross as well. So now we've got two things that all connect, and we should be able to draw a line to them or an arrow to show how they connect. Oh, favorite jacket and water bottle. That's great. And as we start adding, oh, dentures, nice. So lost toys could include any object that's there that someone could lose within the park or the zoo. Lost direction, obviously, new places can be large and hard to figure out. Who do we think gets lost? Make sure you add in the who. When do people get lost? Nice. So we look for places. We lose people. Excellent. Scared and upset child. Yep. Why are people having problems? Why are people losing toys, losing children, losing direction? Okay, they get confused. That's great. They're distracted. Yeah. Is the map available? Poor signage, that's a great one. What about a lack of Wi-Fi? Do we have the tools necessary? What do we think about the people who are getting lost? Do we want to help them? If I'm walking around the park, do I have the mental capacity to help the person that's there? Some great ones that are populating. This is great. Poor parenting. I love it. I'm going to say, like, we're also exhausted. Will they get hurt? Nice question. So as you can see, as we're going through this, we're coming up with a lot of questions, a lot of unknowns. And the initial thought is, let's just get them all out there. We can associate them after and do some clustering. That usually works as well. And then abduction, nice. Do not recommend abducting children at the park. However, it does happen. In San Diego, we've got a lot of exploitation. So parents are definitely really worried about their kids that way. Lost toys, yeah. And then what do we do once we know something is lost or someone is lost? Oops. And it looks like we're going to have overlap between toys, children, and probably direction. Where do I go? What do I do? Oh my gosh, we just ruined an experience. There's fighting that's happening now. What happens when there's fighting? All right, tantrums. That's excellent. We retrace our steps. Perfect. We probably check all of our personal belongings too. Is it still on me? Okay. So at this point, we've got some really great ideas on here. We can zoom in and we can start to say, okay, which ones belong to which ideas? Which ones are we most interested in? So let's see where we have gaps. I'm going to zoom in to lost toys to start. Okay, so we've got sentimental items, favorite toys, pacifiers, things that are gross, blankets, parking lot, dentures, camera lens, could never be found again, distraction, sweet treats. Okay, so we've got a lot of objects. That's great. Up here, we've got someone found it. They've turned it in. Can it be replaced from the gift shop? Check all the personal belongings. Is it still on me? Lost at the end of the trip. Stop thinking. When was it last seen? Oh, stop and think. A good time turned into a bad time. Air tag. What's air tag? We've got keys, retracing our steps, air tags for everyone, sad, ruined experience.
Oh, it says Apple AirTag helps you find things.
Oh,
I
nice.
didn't know that.
Oh, that's that new tag, the circlet
New.
that they just announced. Okay. Nice. So yeah, putting an AirTag on people, that's an interesting solution. Don't lose anyone that way. So there's a lot of experiences here. And what we can do is we can start to say, hey, I'm really interested in this idea of we're lost at the end of a trip. And what happens when somebody found it? There's something interesting there. There's also something really interesting about a good time turning into a bad time. And so what do you do? What are those tasks? So it's really interesting to think about, like, you're retracing your steps, you're ruined, like you've got a ruined experience, and how that affects people. Are we missing anything in here? I feel like this is one whole section over here. We've got a couple on like location. We've got a couple of reasons why we lose it. So we could probably, like, if we're going to do research on this, I would say we definitely need to figure out what are some of the other reasons why things happen, why we lose our toys. So we've got a gap here if we've only got one. This activity of retracing our steps, that's really interesting, but we've got, like, what are all the other tasks that we do, that we go through when we're trying to retrace our steps? So we definitely want to fill that piece in. We've got a lot of ideas of what gets lost and how people feel about it. But this idea of, like, it's gross and someone found it, now what? Do they really turn it in or don't they? So there's a question there, like, why, what happens when something is found? Let's take a look at lost direction. So again, looking for gaps, looking for a lot of information. Here we've got wasted time, stop and think, when was it last seen, poor lighting, vindictive guide, ask for help, poorly maintained paths, poor signage, landmarks, worry, tired, overwhelmed. The map is illustrated, not flat. Where am I? Have I been here before? I can't read the map. Which way is the exit? Where are the penguins? It's a good question. Where can I eat? We're fighting. How do I leave? I'm distracted, confused. Pull up the map on my phone. Battery died. Battery is draining because of it. Elderly people, scared or upset child. Okay, so we've got people, right? We've got questions of, like, where am I? Oops. And have I been there? And then we've got a whole lot of, like, things that happen to them, right? And we know that there's a lot of things that happen with around objects that are designed to help that just aren't doing the help. So it looks like we've got a lot of really good coverage, but are we missing anything? Do we have the who, what, where, and why here? Do we have big questions that we could ask of ourselves? So if we've got lost direction, feels like we have a good sense of why we think people lose their direction, but is that really what's going on? Or do we need to dig in deeper? We think we know that we've got guides that are unhelpful. We think we know that signage isn't helpful, but is that really the case? Or does the zoo and the park actually have excellent signage, or think they have excellent signage, and it's just not doing the job? All of this helps us narrow in on exactly what do we think we know, and how do we then push forward into solving for the next thing. So you've got your bias brainstorm. Now what? Well, we're going to dig deeper into framing the problem. So I'm back on the slides at this point. Here, the next step is we'll take that who, what, where, and why, and we're going to frame out a problem statement. And the reason why we do the problem statement from a bias brainstorm is because, just like what I was showing you, like, you know where you think you've got gaps, you know where you think you have the answers, but is that really the answer? Yes, no, maybe so. All of those things have deep opportunities for you to design something around. So if you're working with the zoo and they tell you that our signage is great and nobody gets lost, and you get in there and you're like, oh yeah, they're wrong, everybody's getting lost. Well, now you can go through, like, here's why the client thinks that they have great signage, but let's find out from our end user why they're getting lost and what is actually at the heart of that loss. When you're developing your problem statements from here, the focus should really be on clear and concise descriptions of the issue that needs to be addressed, and by a designed solution. You also want to make sure that it's focused on, that it's used to focus the team on the problem to be solved. So if your client is not really interested in wayfinding and they're actually interested in something else altogether, yes, it may be an issue that you could research, but refocus it towards something that your client is definitely interested in. And if that stuff comes up through research, you can surface it in the appendix. The problem statement should also evolve with you. What I've noticed is that people have a hard time evolving from here's where I think we are, and their biases stop them from being able to move forward. So definitely remind yourself to stay open to what's happening in research, what is happening with the end users that you're talking with. Think about through all the ideas and all the challenges that they've told you. Now, the reason why we use good problem statements is because they help us align towards that goal. They help define what the goal is about, and they help us care about meeting that goal. I'll share a couple of different examples. So this was an example of the zoo when we were looking at the entranceway and trying to understand where are the challenges with the entry and exit. They refined it to, there's a problem around the entry and heat and long lines. So let's focus in there. And the problem statement was that the San Diego Zoo entrance point lacks adequate seating, shade, and amenities for zoo guests who may need to wait outside the attraction for family members, tickets, and transportation. This gave us very clear and concise area to focus for research, and it helped us understand who we're going to talk to and why we're going to talk to them. Okay. So again, here are our biases. And I'll open it up to the floor. Do you guys have any questions?
Any questions? Got nothing.
Asha, I've got a question for you. So you saw that bias brainstorm, right? Okay. From that, if you were going to tell us which biases to watch out for from a bias brainstorm, which one comes to mind?
There's probably a couple coming to mind for me. The first one is around anchoring, that if you're going in and kind of starting to do this mind map and exploring, you might kind of be aware that the first things you pick up on might not be the actual thing that you end up needing to focus on. So the work you were doing to really be looking all over and looking at all of the patterns, even if your mind is going to one place as the solution. So that's one thing that comes up. But I think even more than that, the congruence bias is really important here. When you're speaking about evolving your problem statement over time as the research comes in, I think if we go into the zoo, like you were saying, we walk in and we say, nah, the signage is not good, and you're looking around and you're seeing it, we might lock on to like, our hypothesis is that the signage is the problem. And we might miss, as we're talking to individuals, another one that might come up is confirmation bias. We might be talking to individuals and only picking up the information they're telling us that supports that hypothesis we have, instead of missing that there's this whole other piece around the fact that there isn't enough seating in this area. And so people are kind of standing around and dropping things. We might miss that. And so I think that's the thing that can come up there for me. Yeah.
Yeah, really cool.
Yeah, we have another question here from an attendee. Can you give us a business example of how to put this in practice? What are the most common kind of business examples?
Okay, and it looks like it's aimed at the exercise itself,
Yeah,
so the mind map and developing a problem frame from that. So the San Diego Zoo was one great example of that. The challenge that we were focusing on was dealing with how customers are experiencing the zoo, and specifically dealing with some of the things that the customer service aspect of the zoo. When you have a lost and found, when you've got customer service related to, the family, people, the volunteers around the zoo that are there to help answer questions. The challenge there is, what do we need to help them understand, and why are people having issues there? So focusing on loss combined some of the big challenges that the zoo was looking at into one succinct issue, and then it allowed us to explore many different issues across the zoo experience. Might be based in a bias. Great question. So that happens all the time. For example, I've been working with a client lately on really understanding a delivery customer's experience of, and the biggest challenge is that they see the customer as God, and whatever the customer wants, yay, we're going to go for it. But the biggest challenge is that those customers are creating more friction for the end user, which is not helping. So the bias brainstorm early would help that customer that client better understand what's going on with their own thoughts, and where they know or should know that they have gaps in knowledge. Their focus is on the customer, but they don't realize is that by not fixing the driver experience and how that delivery is actually going to get made, then they're creating a lot more problems by just giving the customer everything that they want.
Yeah, I'll add a piece in here too, from just the perspective of communication, right? In terms of how do we start, when we start seeing this, and this comes up for UX researchers often as well, if anyone's been involved in research and had it not be seen as valuable, right? As like, we actually need to do this work to kind of get through these biases and kind of find those innovative solutions. One thing is to not just call it out, right? So we wouldn't want to be like, this is the bias that you're biased and this is what's coming up, and kind of calling it out that way, but rather think about cultivating a culture of curiosity. So that might mean asking those open questions and kind of using that kind of design framework to actually have that conversation. What are some other perspectives we might not be seeing, and going about it that way, rather than saying like, this sounds a lot like the halo effect, right? So we might use that for ourselves, but again, remembering that even though today, hopefully everyone's leaving with a lot less judgment around bias in general, that many others still have those negative feelings towards bias. So just that gentle kind of opening to curiosity as you're speaking with clients that might be biased and trying to push you in a specific direction.
Yeah, today I was building a journey map for that exact purpose, because we were focusing on like one area, and all of our PMs were saying, no, like, I just care about this feature. And yet, because we know the user experience and the journey, we can tell them that that one feature causes all these problems, ripples across the entire journey map, from not just that one customer that uses that feature, but 5 other types of customers that other teams care about that you don't care about. So it's important to surface where other journeys overlap.
We have a couple more minutes if there's any more questions. I would want to ask, is there any kind of daily, because I know for being able to overcome this, being able to point out our biases, it sort of seems to be a practice that you have to integrate into your life, maybe daily or maybe weekly. Are there any suggestions on how to be able to do that so that we can really quickly recognize when we're having some sort of bias?
I can jump in here and just say, sometimes slowing down helps you speed up. And so I think those moments of intentionality. So for example, during the exercise today, as you create circles, like let's say we're looking for patterns, a quick pause to say, why did I find that pattern? What is drawing me to that? And making sure you're checking that small thing, or if you're in a user interview, slowing down just to listen a little bit deeper. And so the slow down actually helps you speed up. And so I would say, don't be afraid to slow down, to do that mindful check-in on a regular basis throughout the process, because it actually helps you make fewer, not fall kind of victim to your biases over and over, and then have to like make costly track backs to kind of course correct for that. Christine, would you add anything to that?
No, I think that solves it.
Yeah. So just a bit of mindfulness, right, goes a long way. It goes a long way.
And slowing down.
Yes.
We have one more before we end today's session. Crazy idea. Is it a good idea to involve the client or a user in a mind mapping session?
Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. What you end up seeing is that there's going to be a power play there. So definitely making sure that the end user and the client see each other as equals is very important. And that your end user is well prepared to participate and knows how to use this before they come into it. You may want to also introduce the idea and the method to your client beforehand too, so that they also feel comfortable using it and speaking out. But once everybody's on the same page, go for it, because at that point you've got a large group of people coming together with disparate ideas and sharing their ideas and how they interrelate and why they relate to each other. This mind map tool on Google, it's fantastic for easy sharing. And as we saw today, with a little bit of tweak, you can open it out to a large group and get a lot of feedback quickly. That was about 7 minutes, maybe. And we had a full board. So fantastic. Yeah, definitely include your customers, include your clients, and make sure that your end users are engaging with you and engaging with your client all the time.
Well, thanks so much. I think we're right at the end of time. So just a special thank you for not only answering those questions, but guiding us through this process and helping us learn a little bit more about our own personal biases. Here is Asha Bauer and Christine Angel's information if you guys want to ask any other questions. And thank you everyone for joining, and we'll be sending our post-event survey shortly. And we really want to hear from you. And again, if you're interested in volunteering, shoot me an email or get me on Slack. And if you're not part of our Slack community, I think it's globaluxd.com/Slack, or you can go on the meetup about section, and there should be an event link, a Slack link right over there. So again, thank you so much for our panelists, our speakers, and for everyone who was able to attend. And we'll see you at the next one.